When it comes to Rocket League, there's not much advice that I think is worth giving. A lot of what is said can only be applied to a very limited number of situations. It's really hard to come up with advice that is actually helpful. So I'll just start this video out with a list of what I think is worth going over. Then we'll look at why I don't find a lot of value in other advice. Any advice I like to give is related to deliberate practice, commitment to the sport, mindfulness meditation, imagery, yoga, exercise, and having a support system. Deliberate practice means you should master the fundamentals, and you need to maintain them. And you also need to discover and overcome whatever weaknesses you have. You can't focus only on what you're good at. Commitment means making your sport a priority. Elite performance isn't something that comes easily. You're gonna get discouraged. Things are going to be hard, but you need to be committed to persisting. When it comes to improving performance, the science seems to say that mindfulness meditation and imagery are better than traditional psychological skills training. To paraphrase sports psychology professor Eddie O'Connor, it's not that these psychological skills are ineffective, it's that there seems to be a prerequisite skill or prerequisite skill set to use them effectively. Lastly, yoga, exercise, and having a support system, family or friends, are all things that are linked to better mental health. And peak performance requires us to be at our best health. That's it. That's all the advice I have. So let's move on to why I think some of the other advice that's out there isn't really that great. I want to start the second part of this video off by talking about this funny looking guy named David Hume. And don't worry, this is going to be about Rocket League in a very roundabout way. Before Hume, and even still after Hume, there was kind of this idea that humans have this crazy, rational characteristic that no other animals have. And they are baser creatures, and they think emotionally, and we're great, we think rationally. And on this point, Hume disagreed. He says, reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passions and can never pretend to any other office than to serve and obey them. Under my view, they can both be considered as methods of thinking. For feeling, it's sort of an emotional calculus. You're using your emotions to decide how you should interact with a situation. That's a type of thinking. And then the other one is a much more formal and a straightforward type of reasoning. However, what I want to be the takeaway is that these are both interdependent systems that evolved together. Well, one evolved later than the other, but they evolved together when they did evolve at the same time. Emotions are extremely important in our lives, and they help us determine what our values are. Cognition without feelings would be aimless. Where are you supposed to devote these mental resources if there's nothing you care about? As far as this video is going to be concerned, there are basically two different types of problems. The first is the traditional problem, in which when you interact with the problem, you don't get to change any of the variables really. You don't affect it by making choices. This type of situation involves just one person, one player, or just one agent. The second type of problem is a game, and by that I mean a game theory game. So these are problems that involve two or more people. These types of problems are actually so complicated that we usually just stick to trying to understand games that only involve two people. Increasing the number of people makes it exponentially more complicated. I say people, but these players can also be computers. The technical term is agent, and by that we just mean anyone that can make their own choices. So that could be a robot, a computer, a person, or whatever. It doesn't have to be a person. However, Rocket League is a three-dimensional game, and it usually involves 6 players. That's a really complicated game. And if we're expecting anyone to come up with some rules for how we should play the game, that's kind of a reach. It doesn't seem like there are going to be good rules that can be put into a verbal format or a mathematical format that can actually be expressed and communicated effectively. Best case scenario, there might be a few, but we really can't expect many. It seems more like something people are going to have to learn. They're just going to have to go through the experience and practice as much as they can on what they're bad at. I took a break for finals, but for about the last month and a half or so, I've been working on all of my weaknesses through different sets of drills that I've been doing. There were 3 major drills that I did, and 3 phases that lasted 2 to 3 weeks each. The first drill was the dribbling challenge number 2, and in phase 1, all I did was this at normal speed. At phase 2, I used boogl mod to bump up the speed to 1.337, and then in phase 3, I put it back down to ×1 speed. Also, in the first phase, I only did each drill for 10 minutes and then quit. After that, I just recorded the level I made it to. Then, in phase 3, I tried to do each level to completion, and then recorded the time. The next drill was the obstacle course number 2, and I did this with reverse gravity and with normal gravity. So, for tier 1 with reverse gravity, the full reverse was too much, so I set it down to 400 instead of 650. That made it a little bit easier and I had more time to react. Then, when it got to phase 3, I set it all the way up to 650. That was really hard, but eventually I started getting the hang of it. The third drill was the regular obstacle course number 2. Regular gravity, no extra changes. So in the first tier, all I did was record the level I could make it to in 10 minutes, and then in the second tier, I set up the speed, and then in the third tier, I set the speed back down and recorded how long it took me to complete all the levels. I also did some shot trainers, but those ended up taking a lot of time, and they were really hard to track accurately. The Excel spreadsheet that I've linked in the video description, you can just copy that and make it for yourself if you want to do this training. All the information is in there, and I've got other videos on how to install boogl mod and how to work it. If there's anything I missed, feel free to comment. Thanks for watching.
I'm dreaming of that